The blood on Clara Foster's hands had dried hours ago, but she could still feel its weight as she clutched the reins of the stolen horse, her violin case strapped awkwardly across her back. She had watched Samuel die in that smoke-filled St. Louis saloon, his final breath escaping as the man he owed money to pulled the trigger, and she knew with certainty that she would be next if she stayed even one more hour in that cursed city. It was April of 1878, and spring had come early to Missouri, though Clara felt nothing but winter in her bones as she rode west through the darkness, not knowing where safety might find her or if it even existed anymore in this brutal world. Her fingers ached from gripping the leather reins too tightly, her knuckles white beneath the grime and dried blood. Samuel had been her husband for barely 3 months, a whirlwind marriage born of desperation rather than love. He had promised her a better life, said his gambling would pay off, that they would travel to California where she could play her violin in proper concert halls instead of dingy saloons, where men grabbed at her skirts and spat tobacco juice on the floor. Instead, he had accumulated debts with dangerous men, men with cold eyes and quick triggers, men who saw her as little more than collateral. The horse beneath her was tiring. Its breathing labored as dawn broke over the rolling plains. Clara had ridden through the night, following the western road out of St. Louis with no clear destination in mind. Her only thought had been escape, survival, putting as much distance as possible between herself and Marcus Dalton, the man who had killed Samuel and promised her she would sing a different tune before he was done with her. The threat in his voice had been unmistakable, and Clara knew what men like him did to women they considered property of the deceased. She had $23 hidden in her boot, the violin her father had given her before he died of consumption, and the clothes on her back. Everything else had been left behind in the shabby boarding house where she and Samuel had been staying. The horse she rode was technically stolen, though she preferred to think of it as borrowed since she had every intention of returning it once she found somewhere safe to settle. If such a place existed, by mid-morning the horse was stumbling, and Clara knew she had pushed the animal too hard. Her own exhaustion weighed on her like a physical thing, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, her body aching from hours in the saddle. She had only learned to ride properly in the past year, and her inexperience showed in every sore muscle. The landscape had shifted gradually from the familiar environs of Missouri into territory that felt wilder, less tamed by human hands. When she spotted the town in the distance, her first instinct was to avoid it entirely. Towns meant people, people meant questions, questions meant danger, but the horse needed rest and water, and so did she. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and her head throbbed with dehydration. She would have to risk it, at least long enough to water the horse and perhaps buy some supplies with her meager funds. The sign at the edge of town, read Winnetka, Kansas, and Clara felt her stomach twist with anxiety as she rode down what passed for the main street. It was smaller than she had hoped, just a collection of weathered buildings that looked like they had been thrown up hastily and never quite finished. A general store, a saloon, what might have been a church or a meeting hall, a blacksmith's forge with smoke rising lazily from the chimney, and a handful of other structures she could not immediately identify. A few people glanced her way as she passed, their eyes taking in her disheveled appearance and blood-stained dress with varying degrees of interest. Clara kept her gaze forward, searching for a water trough where she could let the horse drink. She found one outside the general store and dismounted with a groan, her legs nearly buckling beneath her after so many hours of riding. "You look like you have been through hell and back, miss." The voice came from behind her, masculine and rough but not unkind. Clara spun around, her hand instinctively going to the small knife she kept hidden in her pocket, a pitiful weapon but the only one she had. The man standing a few feet away held up his hands in a placating gesture. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. His dark hair was too long, brushing his collar, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore the practical clothing of a working man, denim trousers, a worn cotton shirt, a leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the holster well used but carefully maintained. "I mean you no harm," he said quietly, his voice steady and calm. "Just making an observation. You look like you could use some help." "I am fine," Clara said, her voice coming out more shrill than she intended. "Just passing through. The horse needed water." The man's eyes flickered to the brand on the horse's flank, then to the dried blood on Clara's dress, then back to her face. His expression remained neutral, but she could see him making calculations, piecing together a story from the evidence before him. "That is a St. Louis brand on that horse," he said conversationally. "Long way from home." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. "I bought him there. Yesterday." "Bought him?" The man did not make it a question, just repeated her words as though tasting them. "And rode him near to death getting here. Must have been running from something pretty terrible." "I do not know what you mean." "Sure you do not." He took a step closer and Clara tensed, her hand tightening on the knife in her pocket. But the man merely nodded toward the general store. "My name is Cole Sawyer. I run a ranch about 5 miles west of here, up in the hills. The store belongs to my uncle." "You look like you could use a meal and a place to rest that horse before you kill him." "I cannot pay much," Clara admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. "Did not ask you to." Cole's expression softened slightly. "You are running from something, and based on that blood on your dress and the fear in your eyes, I am guessing it is not something you did wrong." "Am I close?" Clara's throat tightened, and to her horror, she felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, refusing to break down in front of this stranger, no matter how kind his voice sounded. She had learned the hard way that kindness could be a mask for cruelty. "My husband was killed last night," she said finally, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "The man who killed him said I belonged to him now to settle the debt. I ran." Cole's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Smart woman. Men like that do not let go easy, though. He might come looking for you, I know." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "That is why I need to keep moving. I just needed to rest the horse." "How far west you planning on going?" "California, maybe Oregon, as far as I can get." Cole studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. Then he seemed to come to a decision. "You will not make it 3 days on that horse in your condition. You are dead on your feet, and that animal is going to drop if you push him any harder. Come out to the ranch. You can rest, get cleaned up, and I will lend you a fresh horse, no strings attached." "Why would you do that?" Clara asked suspiciously. "You do not know me." "No, I do not. But I know what it is like to run from something that wants to destroy you, and I know what it is like to need help and not have anyone offer it." He adjusted his hat, looking almost embarrassed. "I live alone out there." "Well, just me and my ranch hand, Tom. He is about 60 years old and mostly deaf, so you do not need to worry about him bothering you. You can stay in the guest room in the main house. It has a lock on the door. Take a day or 2 to recover, then head out with a better chance of making it to wherever you are going." Clara wanted to refuse. Every instinct she had developed during her short, hard marriage told her not to trust this man, not to put herself in a vulnerable position. But exhaustion was making her vision blur at the edges, and she knew he was right about the horse. If she kept pushing west without rest, She would end up stranded on the prairie with no transportation and no shelter, an easy target for anyone following her trail. "Just a day," she said finally. "Maybe two, then I have to keep moving." "Fair enough." Cole turned and walked to where his own horse was hitched outside the general store, a sturdy bay gelding that looked well cared for. "Follow me. It is about a half-hour ride." Clara led the exhausted stolen horse after him, her mind racing with doubts and fears. But she was committed now, and she could only hope that her instincts about this quiet cowboy were correct. The alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. The ride to Cole's ranch took them out of the small town and into rolling hills covered with prairie grass that waved in the warm spring breeze. Clara could see cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the green landscape. The sky was a brilliant blue, unmarred by clouds, and under other circumstances, she might have found the scenery beautiful. Instead, she could only think about how exposed she felt, how visible they were to anyone who might be searching for her. Cole did not try to make conversation during the ride, which Clara appreciated. Her mind was too full of the previous night's horrors to engage in small talk. She kept seeing Samuel's face as the bullet struck him, the surprise in his eyes giving way to nothing at all. She had not loved him, but she had not wished him dead either. He had been weak and foolish, but he had never raised a hand to her, which was more than could be said for some husbands. The ranch house came into view after about 40 minutes of riding. It was a single-story structure built of wood and stone, larger than Clara had expected, with a covered porch running along the front. Several outbuildings were scattered around the property, including a barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Everything appeared well maintained, the wood recently painted, the fences in good repair. Whatever else Cole Sawyer might be, he was clearly not a lazy man. An older man emerged from the barn as they approached, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Cole. He wore dusty work clothes and a battered hat, and he moved with the careful gait of someone whose joints troubled him. "Tom," Cole called out, raising his voice considerably. "We have a guest. This is Miss Foster. She will be staying in the guest room for a day or two." Tom squinted at Clara, then nodded enthusiastically. "Good to have company. House gets too quiet with just this one." He jerked his thumb toward Cole with a grin. Cole dismounted and helped Clara down from her horse, his hands steady and impersonal on her waist. "Tom will take care of the horses. Let me show you to your room." Clara retrieved her violin case from where it was strapped to the saddle, clutching it like a lifeline. It was the last piece of her old life, the life before Samuel, before St. Louis, before everything had gone wrong. Her father had bought it for her when she was 12 years old, scraping together money he could barely spare because he believed in her talent. She had been playing professionally since she was 16, working in concert halls and theaters across the East. Then the money had dried up, her mother had died, her father had followed 6 months later, and Clara had found herself alone in a world that had no patience for penniless musicians, no matter how skilled. The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a sturdy wooden table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Everything was clean, if a bit sparse, and Clara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was not the home of a man with cruel intentions. This was the home of someone who valued function over form and took pride in basic maintenance. Cole led her down a short hallway to a small bedroom that contained a narrow bed covered with a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. A window looked out over the prairie, the view stretching for miles. It was not fancy, but after the squalid boarding house room she had been living in with Samuel, it looked like paradise. "There is water in the pitcher," Cole said, lingering in the doorway. "I will heat some more so you can wash properly. There is a lock on the door, like I said. Kitchen is through there if you get hungry. Make yourself at home." "Thank you," Clara said, and she meant it. Whatever his motivations, he was offering her something precious, a chance to catch her breath. Cole nodded and backed out of the room, closing the door behind him. Clara immediately turned the lock, then sank down onto the bed, her violin case clutched against her chest. Only then, in the safety of the locked room, did she allow herself to cry for the first time since fleeing St. Louis. The tears came hard and fast, racking her body with sobs that she muffled against the quilt. She cried for Samuel, for her own fear, for the life she had lost, and the uncertain future that stretched ahead of her. When the tears finally subsided, she felt hollowed out but slightly clearer-headed. She set the violin carefully on the dresser and began to strip out of her blood-stained dress, examining the dark stains with a detached numbness. The dress would have to be burned. She could never wear it again without seeing Samuel's death. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. "Miss Foster." "I have hot water for you," Cole's voice called from the other side. Clara wrapped herself in the quilt and unlocked the door, opening it just enough to take the heavy bucket of steaming water he offered. His eyes stayed carefully averted, and he stepped back as soon as she had the bucket in hand. "There are some clothes in the dresser," he said, still not looking directly at her. "They belonged to my mother. She passed 5 years ago, but I kept some of her things. You look about her size. Please help yourself." Before Clara could respond, he had turned and walked away, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. She closed and locked the door again, then poured the hot water into the basin. The simple act of washing away the grime and blood felt like a baptism, a shedding of the previous night's horror. She scrubbed her skin until it was red, watching the water turn gray and rust-colored as it swirled in the basin. The clothes in the dresser were simple but well made, the fabrics soft from years of washing. Clara selected a dark blue cotton dress that fit her reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the waist. She found undergarments, stockings, even a brush for her tangled hair. By the time she was dressed and presentable, she felt more human than she had in hours. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. She hesitated before unlocking the door, but the smell of something cooking drew her out into the main room. Cole stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. He glanced up when she entered and something flickered across his face, an expression she could not quite read. "You look better," he said simply. "Hungry, starving," Clara admitted. "Stew, nothing fancy, but it is hot and filling." He ladled generous portions into 2 bowls and carried them to the table, gesturing for her to sit. "Tom eats in the bunkhouse, so it is just us." They ate in silence for several minutes, Clara too hungry to worry about manners as she devoured the simple meal. The stew was indeed nothing fancy, just beef and vegetables in a thick broth, but it tasted better than anything she remembered eating in months. Cole ate slowly, occasionally glancing at her but mostly keeping his attention on his own food. "Thank you," Clara said finally, setting down her spoon. "For all of this. I cannot pay you back right now, but someday if I can, I will." "No need," Cole said. He pushed his empty bowl away and leaned back in his chair, studying her with those thoughtful dark eyes. "You said your husband was killed. Do you have family you can go to? Anyone who might help you?" "No. My parents are dead. I have a sister somewhere in New York, but we have not spoken in 3 years. She did not approve of my marriage, and she was right not to. Samuel was a gambler and a fool, and I married him because I was desperate and alone and stupid." "You are not stupid," Desperate and alone, maybe, but not stupid. A stupid woman would have stayed and let that man take her. Clara looked down at her hands, seeing the clean skin and short, practical nails. Her fingers were long and nimble musician's fingers. I am a violinist, was a violinist. I do not know what I am anymore. Why, past tense, you still have your instrument. Cole nodded toward the bedroom where she had left the case. Hard to make a living playing violin when you are running for your life. Fair point. Cole stood and began clearing the dishes, moving with an easy efficiency that suggested he was long accustomed to taking care of himself. But maybe once you get where you are going, you can play again. Seems like a waste of talent otherwise. You have never even heard me play. How do you know I have talent? The way you hold that case, like it is the most precious thing in the world. Nobody treats an instrument that way unless they truly love playing it, and people do not love something they are not good at. Clara felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words. Samuel had never understood her music, had seen it only as a means to earn money when his gambling luck was down. Her parents had encouraged her talent, but had always wanted her to find a respectable husband and settle down. None of them had ever really understood that music was not just something she did, it was something she was. "Where did you learn to play?" Cole asked, bringing the conversation back as he pumped water to wash the dishes. "My father taught me the basics when I was young. Then I studied with a proper teacher for several years. I played in concert halls in Boston, Philadelphia, even New York once. Then money got tight, and I started playing in smaller venues. Then my mother died, my father got sick, and by the time he passed, I was playing in saloons just to keep a roof over my head." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She had not let herself think about how far she had fallen. "Sounds like you have had a rough time of it. What about you?" Clara asked, eager to turn the conversation away from herself. "How did you end up with a ranch in Kansas?" "Inherited it from my father. He came out here in the 50s, claimed the land before Kansas was even a state. Built this place with his own hands along with my mother. They worked it together until he died about 10 years back. I was 19, just barely old enough to handle the responsibility, but I did not have much choice. My mother needed help and I was all she had. Then she passed, like I said, and it has just been me and Tom ever since. No wife. No plans for one." Cole's expression shuddered slightly. "Had a girl I was sweet on once. She decided ranch life was not for her and moved back east with a salesman from Denver. That was 3 years ago. Have not been much interested in courting since then. I am sorry. Do not be. She did me a favor, really. Better to know someone's mind before you marry them than after." He dried the last dish and put it away in the cabinet. "You must be exhausted. You should rest. We can talk more later if you want or not. No pressure." Clara realized she was indeed exhausted, the brief surge of energy from the food already fading. "You are being very kind to a stranger. I cannot help wondering why." Cole turned to face her, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. "You want the truth? I am not entirely sure myself. Maybe I just do not like the idea of dangerous men chasing defenseless women. Maybe I see something in you that reminds me of myself when I was lost and trying to find my way. Or maybe I am just too soft-hearted for my own good. Take your pick." "I think it is the last one," Clara said, surprising herself with a small smile. It was the first time she had smiled since before Samuel's death, and it felt strange on her face. Cole smiled back, and the expression transformed his weathered features, making him look younger and more approachable. "You are probably right. Tom tells me all the time that I am too trusting for a rancher, says I will get taken advantage of someday. I promise I am not here to take advantage of you. I know. You are here because you do not have anywhere else to go, and that is reason enough." He pushed off from the counter and headed toward the door. I have work to do. Make yourself at home. If you need anything, Tom is usually in the barn or around the property somewhere. Just holler real loud if you need him, on account of the deafness." After Cole left, Clara returned to the small bedroom and locked the door behind her. The bed beckoned, and she crawled under the quilt fully clothed, suddenly unable to keep her eyes open for another moment. She fell asleep almost instantly, plunging into dreams that were mercifully free of blood and gunshots. She woke hours later to the sound of voices outside her window. The sun had moved considerably across the sky, suggesting it was late afternoon. Clara sat up slowly, disoriented for a moment before memory came flooding back. She was at Cole Sawyer's ranch, somewhere in Kansas, miles from St. Louis and Marcus Dalton. The voices outside grew louder and Clara moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Cole and Tom stood near the barn, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. She could not make out the words, but Cole's posture was tense, his jaw set in a stubborn line. Tom gestured emphatically, his weathered face concerned. Finally, Cole shook his head firmly and walked away, heading toward the house. Tom watched him go with an expression of clear exasperation, then turned and shuffled back into the barn. Clara stepped away from the window, not wanting to be caught spying. A few moments later, a knock sounded at her door. "Miss Foster, you awake?" Clara unlocked and opened the door to find Cole standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could sense tension beneath the surface. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Maybe. I need to be straight with you about something." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Tom rode into town this afternoon to pick up supplies. He heard talk at the general store. Seems a man came through asking about a woman traveling alone on a stolen horse. Dark hair, wearing a blood-stained dress. Said she was his wife and had taken ill, was not thinking straight. Said he was very worried about her." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Marcus Dalton, the man who killed your husband?" "Yes, he must have followed my trail from St. Louis." Fear made her voice shake. "I need to leave, right now. I am sorry, I should not have stayed. I have put you in danger." "Hold on." Cole held up a hand. Tom did not tell him anything. In fact, Tom said he had not seen anyone matching that description. But here is the thing. Small towns talk. If you ride out of here now, someone will see you and mention it. Word will get back to this Dalton fellow. You will be easy to track on the open prairie. So what do? I cannot just stay here and wait for him to find me. Actually, that might be exactly what you should do. For now, at least." Cole's expression was serious. "He is looking for a woman traveling alone. He is not looking for a woman staying at my ranch. If you keep your head down, stay out of town, he might move on thinking you went further west. Or he might search every ranch and farm in the area until he finds me." "Possible, but not likely. He does not know anyone around here, and folks are not exactly welcoming to strangers asking too many questions. If he starts poking around private property, he will find himself looking down the barrel of a shotgun before long." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had seized her body. "I am terrified. I know. But you are safe here, I promise you that. He would have to go through me to get to you, and I am not an easy man to go through." There was steel in Cole's voice, a hardness that had not been there before. It should have frightened Clara, but instead she found it oddly comforting. "Why are you doing this? You do not even know me. Told you before. I do not like men who hunt down defenseless women." Cole's jaw tightened. "My mother's first husband was a man like that. Beat her near to death before my father helped her escape him. She had to hide for months before the man finally gave up looking for her. If my father had not stepped in, had not given her a safe place to wait it out, I would never have been born. So maybe I am just paying forward what my father did for my mother." The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet. This might get complicated before it gets resolved." Cole settled his hat back on his head. "In the meantime, you should stay inside as much as possible. Tom and I will keep an eye out. If Dalton shows up here, we will handle it. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. I am a pretty good hand with a gun, Miss Foster, and I am not afraid of bullies, even ones who have already killed." He turned to leave, then paused. "You should eat something. There is bread and cheese in the kitchen, and maybe play your violin if you feel like it. Music would be a nice change from the usual quiet around here." After he left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything. Marcus Dalton was close enough to be asking questions in town. The thought made her stomach churn with fear. But Cole seemed confident in his ability to protect her, and something about his quiet strength made her want to believe him. She ventured out into the kitchen and found the bread and cheese he had mentioned. As she ate, she found her gaze drawn to the bedroom where her violin waited. It had been 3 days since she had last played, the longest she had gone without touching the instrument in years. Her fingers itched for the familiar weight of the bow, the smooth wood of the violin's neck. Before she could second-guess herself, Clara retrieved the violin from its case and carried it to the main room. She stood in the center of the space, letting the instrument settle into the familiar position under her chin. Then she drew the bow across the strings, adjusting the tuning with practiced efficiency. The first few notes were tentative, her fingers stiff from disuse and stress. But as she continued to play, muscle memory took over. She started with a simple Bach piece, something she could play in her sleep, letting the music wash over her and through her. The notes filled the small house, bouncing off the wooden walls and creating a richness of sound that surprised her. She moved from Bach to Vivaldi, then to a folk tune her father had taught her as a child. She lost herself in the music, forgetting about Marcus Dalton, about Samuel's death, about everything except the glorious sensation of making something beautiful in a world that seemed determined to be ugly. She did not hear the door open, did not notice Cole standing in the doorway until she finished the piece and lowered her violin. He was watching her with an expression of wonder, his hat in his hands and his weathered face transformed by something like awe. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard," he said quietly. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. I needed to play. It has been too long. You are not exaggerating about your talent. That was extraordinary." Cole stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "My mother used to love music. She would have traded a month's worth of supplies to hear you play like that. I would be happy to play for you whenever you like. It is the least I can do to repay your kindness." "That is not necessary. Maybe not, but I want to." Clara cradled the violin against her chest. "Music is the only thing I have left that is truly mine. The only thing Samuel's debts did not taint. I want to share it." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Then I would be honored to listen, whenever you feel like playing." They stood there for a moment, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. Clara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with fear or survival and everything to do with the quiet man standing across from her. She pushed the feeling down, refusing to acknowledge it. She had just escaped one disastrous marriage. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for another man, no matter how kind he seemed. Over the next several days, Clara settled into an uneasy routine at the ranch. She helped with small tasks around the house, cooking meals and tidying up in a modest attempt to earn her keep. Cole and Tom spent most of their time working with the cattle, leaving before dawn and returning exhausted at sunset. In the evenings, Clara would play her violin, filling the house with music while Cole listened with the same expression of wonder he had worn that first afternoon. They talked during those evening hours, sharing stories about their lives in careful increments. Clara learned that Cole had spent his entire life on the ranch, that he loved the land with a fierce devotion, but sometimes felt isolated by the solitary nature of his work. Cole learned that Clara had been playing violin since she was 6 years old, that she had once dreamed of playing in the great concert halls of Europe, that her marriage to Samuel had been more about survival than love. Tom, for his part, seemed delighted to have Clara around. Despite his deafness, he somehow always appeared when she was practicing, settling into a chair with a contented smile, as though he could feel the music even if he could not fully hear it. He treated her with a courtly respect that made her feel valued rather than burdensome. 5 days after her arrival, Cole returned from town with troubling news. Marcus Dalton was still in Winnetka, still asking questions, still searching for his missing prize. He had shown Clara's description to everyone he encountered, offering a $20 reward for information leading to her whereabouts. So far, no one had come forward, but Cole worried that the money might prove too tempting for some of the more desperate townspeople. "We need to be careful," he told Clara that evening as they sat at the kitchen table. "I have been thinking about it, and I believe the best approach is to hide in plain sight. If anyone asks, 'You are my cousin from Missouri, come to help with the house after my mother's passing.' It explains why you are here, why you are staying in the house, and it gives you a legitimate reason to be around." "Will people believe that?" Clara asked doubtfully. "Why would they not? My mother had family in Missouri. No one knows all of them. And it is not like I am claiming you are my wife or anything scandalous. A cousin helping with household duties is perfectly respectable. What if someone recognizes me from Dalton's description? Dark hair and a blood-stained dress could describe half the women in Kansas on a bad day. You are clean, well-dressed, and clearly settled. You do not look like a woman on the run anymore. You look like you belong here." Clara wanted to argue, but she could not deny the logic of his plan. The alternative was to leave, to strike out on her own again, and the thought filled her with dread. Not just because of Marcus Dalton, but because she was not ready to leave this place, this small refuge where she felt safer than she had in years. "All right," she agreed. "I am your cousin. What is my story if someone asks for details? Keep it simple and close to the truth. You came from St. Louis after your husband died, needed a change of scenery, decided to help me with the ranch for a while. Do not volunteer information, but do not act secretive either. Just be yourself. Myself is a terrified woman hiding from a murderer." "No," Cole said firmly, reaching across the table to take her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since helping her down from the horse that first day, and Clara felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. "Yourself is a talented, brave woman who had the courage to escape a terrible situation. Do not let fear define you." His hand was warm and calloused, rough from years of hard work but gentle in its grip. Clara found herself unable to look away from his eyes, those dark depths that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she suddenly became aware of how close they were sitting, how intimate this simple touch felt. She pulled her hand away, standing up abruptly. "I should get some rest. Thank you for the plan. I will do my best to play the part convincingly." If Cole noticed her sudden withdrawal, he did not comment on it. He simply nodded and wished her a good night, his expression unreadable. In her room, Clara pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, trying to calm her racing heart. This was dangerous, this attraction she felt growing toward Cole Sawyer. She was vulnerable, alone, dependent on his protection. Any feelings she thought she had were probably just gratitude mixed with proximity. She could not afford to complicate her situation with romantic notions, especially not when Marcus Dalton was still hunting for her. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she could not stop thinking about the warmth of Cole's hand, the steadiness of his gaze, the way his face transformed when he listened to her play. She was in trouble, and for the first time since fleeing St. Louis. It had nothing to do with Marcus Dalton. The following week passed in a blur of routine and nervous anticipation. Clara helped Tom tend the vegetable garden behind the house, learning to coax life from the Kansas soil under the old man's patient tutelage. She learned to bake bread in the cast iron oven, to make stew that did not burn, to mend clothes with neat, tiny stitches. The domestic tasks felt strange after years of focusing solely on her music, but there was something satisfying about them, something grounding. Cole maintained a careful distance, friendly but not overly familiar. Clara told herself she was relieved, but late at night, alone in her room, she admitted to herself that she was disappointed. She had grown to anticipate their evening conversations, the way he listened with his whole attention, the rare smiles that made her pulse quicken. She was falling for him, despite her best efforts not to. Falling for his quiet strength, his understated kindness, the way he treated her as though she had value beyond her appearance or her utility. He made her feel safe, not just physically but emotionally, and that was more seductive than any pretty words or expensive gifts could have been. 2 weeks after her arrival, everything changed. Clara was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw Cole and Tom riding in from the range, but they were not alone. A third horse carried a stranger, a man dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in the rough Kansas landscape, her breath caught in her throat. Marcus Dalton. It had to be. She grabbed a knife from the counter, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She should run, hide, do something, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. The door swung open and Cole entered first. His eyes found hers immediately, and he shook his head slightly, a warning to stay calm. The stranger followed him in, and Clara saw immediately that it was not Marcus Dalton. This man was older, softer around the middle, with a neatly trimmed beard and spectacles perched on his nose. "Clara, this is Mr. Patterson, the county sheriff," Cole said carefully. "Sheriff, this is my cousin, Clara Foster." The sheriff tipped his hat politely. "Madam, sorry to intrude on your lunch preparations. I am making rounds, asking if folks have seen anything unusual. We have had a man in town causing some trouble, making threats. Thought people ought to be warned." Clara's hand tightened on the knife handle, but she forced herself to breathe normally. "What kind of threats?" "Claims a woman stole his horse and some money. Says she is deranged, dangerous even. But the more he talks, the less his story adds up." The sheriff's shrewd eyes assessed Clara. "Funny thing is, he keeps changing details. First he said the woman was his wife, then his sister, then his employee. Makes a lawman wonder what the truth really is." "What do you think the truth is?" Cole asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I think he is looking for someone who does not want to be found, and I think his reasons are not on the up and up. I have been a sheriff for 20 years, and I know the look of a man with bad intentions." He turned his attention back to Clara. "If you hear of anyone who might be in trouble, you let me know. It is my job to protect folks in this county, and I take that seriously." "Thank you, Sheriff," Clara managed, her voice only slightly shaky. "We will certainly let you know if we see anything unusual." After the sheriff left, Clara collapsed into a chair, her legs finally giving out. Cole was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "That was good," he said quietly. "You held it together perfectly." "He knows," Clara whispered. "The sheriff knows, maybe, but he is on your side." "Did you hear what he said? He knows Dalton's story does not add up. He is trying to help in his own way. What if Dalton does not believe him? What if he starts searching ranches anyway? Then we deal with it, together." Cole's hand squeezed her shoulder gently. "You are not alone in this, Clara. I meant what I said. He will have to go through me." Clara looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes, the set of his jaw. This man, this virtual stranger, was willing to stand between her and danger. The realization made her chest tight with emotions she did not know how to name. "Cole, I need to tell you something." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I am scared, but not just of Marcus Dalton. I am scared because I am starting to care about you, and I do not know if that is real or if it is just because you saved me. And I do not want to be another burden in your life, another thing you have to protect and worry about." Cole pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "You want the truth? I am scared too. I never expected to feel this way about anyone again, not after Rebecca left. But you are different. You are strong and talented and brave, and you make this quiet house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. I look forward to your music every evening. I look forward to talking with you over dinner. I look forward to seeing you when I come in from working. We barely know each other. I know. But I know enough to realize that what I feel is not just about proximity or circumstance. I see who you are, Clara. I see your courage, your resilience, your passion for your music. And I want to know more. I want to know everything." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but for once they were not tears of fear. "I am still married, or I think I am. Samuel is dead, but I do not know if there was any legal documentation. Everything is such a mess. We can figure that out. When it is safe, when Dalton is gone, we can make sure everything is handled properly. In the meantime, I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking you to let yourself feel what you feel without fear or guilt. What if my feelings change once I am safe? What if this is just gratitude? Then you will leave, and I will be sad, but I will understand. But I do not think that is what this is. I think you feel what I feel, and it scares you because it is real." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, marveling at how right it felt, how perfectly her smaller hand fit into his larger, calloused one. "Yes," she whispered. "It terrifies me. Good. Means it matters." Cole smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made him look years younger. "Means we are both taking a risk." They sat there for a long moment, hands clasped across the table, the lunch forgotten. Outside, they could hear Tom moving around the barn, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred between the two people in the house. The spring breeze rustled through the prairie grass, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. It was an ordinary moment in an ordinary day, but it felt momentous to Clara, like the beginning of something she had stopped believing possible. The peaceful interlude did not last long. 3 days later, Marcus Dalton showed up at the ranch. Clara was in the vegetable garden with Tom when she saw the rider approaching. Something about the way he sat his horse, the purposeful direction of his approach, sent ice through her veins. She stood slowly, her hand gripping the basket of vegetables she had been picking. "Tom," she said, raising her voice. "Who is that?" Tom squinted at the approaching figure, then his weathered face hardened. "Trouble by the look of him. Best get in the house, miss." But Clara found she could not move. She watched, paralyzed, as the rider drew closer and resolved into the face that haunted her nightmares. Marcus Dalton looked exactly as she remembered, cold eyes in a handsome face, expensive clothes that spoke of money and power. He smiled when he saw her, and it was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "There you are," he called out, his voice falsely jovial. "I have been looking everywhere for you, darling." Clara finally found her voice. "I am not your darling, you have no claim on me." "Now, that is where you are wrong." Dalton dismounted with easy grace, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip. "Your husband owed me $500 when he died. That debt passes to you, and I intend to collect one way or another." "That is not how debts work," Tom said firmly, moving to stand between Clara and Dalton. "The lady does not owe you anything. This does not concern you, old man. I am taking what is mine, and no broken-down cowpoke is going to stop me. You are not taking anyone anywhere." The new voice came from behind Dalton, and Clara's heart leaped with relief and fear. Cole stood about 20 feet away, his rifle held loosely in his hands but clearly ready to raise and fire. His face was harder than Clara had ever seen it, his eyes cold as winter. Dalton turned slowly, assessing this new threat. "This your property?" "It is." "Then you should know this woman is a thief and a liar. She stole a horse from St. Louis, murdered her husband, and ran. I am here to bring her to justice." "Funny. The sheriff told me you were looking for a woman who stole from you. No mention of murder before. Story keeps changing, does it not?" Dalton's smile slipped slightly. "I simplified things for the local law, did not want to frighten folks unnecessarily, but the fact remains she is coming with me." "The fact remains you are on my property and you are not welcome here. I am going to give you one chance to turn around and ride out of here. Do not come back. You are making a mistake, friend. This woman is not worth dying for. I am not your friend. And you are the one who needs to worry about dying." Cole's voice was steady, without a hint of hesitation. "That is my cousin you are threatening, and I do not take kindly to men who threaten my family." Clara could see the calculation in Dalton's eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards. He was armed, Cole was armed, and the situation could turn deadly in a heartbeat. She wanted to scream at Cole to be careful, to not risk himself for her, but she forced herself to remain silent. Any distraction now could be fatal. "This is not over," Dalton said finally. "I do not forget a debt, and I do not forget a face. You might think you are protecting her, but all you are doing is putting yourself in my crosshairs." "I will lose sleep over that tonight," Cole said dryly. "Now get off my land before I shoot you for trespassing." Dalton remounted his horse with deliberate slowness, making it clear he was not leaving out of fear. "Enjoy your time together. It will not last long." With that parting threat, he wheeled his horse around and rode off at a gallop. Clara's legs finally gave out, and she sank to the ground among the vegetables. Tom hurried over to her, his gnarled hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her up. Cole lowered his rifle but kept his eyes on Dalton's retreating form until the man disappeared over a rise. "You should have let me go with him," Clara said, her voice shaking. "Now he will come back with more men with a plan. He will hurt you." "No, he will not." Cole finally looked at her, and some of the hardness left his expression. "He is a bully and a coward, Clara. Bullies like him operate in the shadows, threatening defenseless targets. They do not do well when someone stands up to them. He expected me to hand you over, or at least to negotiate. Now he knows that is not an option, and he has to decide if you are worth the risk of a real confrontation. You do not know what he is capable of. He killed Samuel without hesitation." "I know. But I also know men like him. I have dealt with cattle rustlers and claim jumpers and every other kind of lowlife that operates out here. They are all the same under the skin. They count on fear and intimidation. When that does not work, they move on to easier targets. What if you are wrong? Then I will deal with it. But I am not wrong." Cole walked over to her and cupped her face gently in his hands. I am not going to let him hurt you. Do you understand me? I am not going to let anyone hurt you ever again. Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of overwhelming emotion, a mix of fear and gratitude and something deeper, something that felt dangerously like love. She leaned into Cole's touch, letting herself draw strength from his solid presence. I am so tired of being afraid, she whispered. I know, but you are safe. I promise you are safe. Tom cleared his throat awkwardly. Might be a good idea to get the lady inside, just in case that fellow decides to circle back. Cole nodded and gently guided Clara toward the house, his arm protectively around her shoulders. She let him lead her, let him settle her into a chair by the fireplace, let him bring her water and speak in quiet, reassuring tones. She felt hollowed out, wrung dry by the confrontation. That evening, Cole insisted on checking all the windows and doors, making sure everything was secure. He brought his rifle inside and propped it near the door, within easy reach. Tom volunteered to sleep in the house rather than the bunkhouse, just to add an extra set of eyes and ears. Clara appreciated their caution, but she knew sleep would be impossible. She sat by the fireplace long after the men had retired to their respective rooms, staring into the dying embers and trying to quiet her racing thoughts. She kept seeing Marcus Dalton's face, hearing the confidence in his voice when he promised this was not over. She did not hear Cole emerge from his room, did not notice him until he sat down in the chair beside her. He had pulled on a shirt over his underthings but was still clearly dressed for bed. In the dim firelight, he looked younger, more vulnerable somehow. Could not sleep either. He asked quietly, every time I close my eyes I see him. That will pass, takes time but it will pass. Cole reached over and took her hand. I meant what I said earlier, you are safe here. I will not let anything happen to you. You cannot make that promise. You do not control what happens. No, but I control what I do, and I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. I have been thinking. Maybe we should go see the sheriff, tell him the whole story. Get it on record that Dalton is harassing you, that he made threats on my property. It would give us legal recourse if he tries anything else. What if the sheriff does not believe me? What if he sides with Dalton? He will not. I saw the way he talked about Dalton the other day. He knows something is off, and Sheriff Patterson is a good man. He will help if we give him the facts. Clara considered this. The idea of involving the law terrified her, but Cole was right that having official documentation of Dalton's harassment could provide some protection. All right. We can try talking to the sheriff. Tomorrow. First thing in the morning we will ride into town together. Cole squeezed her hand gently. Try to get some rest. I will stay up for a while, keep watch. Nothing is going to happen tonight. Clara nodded, though she still doubted sleep would come. But knowing Cole was watching over her brought a small measure of comfort. She stood, then on impulse, leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Thank you for everything. Cole's eyes widened slightly and color crept into his weathered cheeks. You are welcome. Sweet dreams, Clara. In her room, Clara finally crawled under the quilt and closed her eyes. To her surprise, sleep came more easily than expected, pulling her down into dreams that were blessedly free of threats and fear. The next morning dawned clear and warm, with the promise of summer heat to come. Clara dressed carefully in one of the simple dresses from Cole's mother's collection, brushed her hair until it shone, and tried to calm her jangling nerves. Going to town meant potentially being seen, being recognized, being vulnerable. But it also meant taking control of her situation, rather than just hiding and hoping for the best. Cole was already in the kitchen when she emerged, dressed in his cleanest clothes and with his hair neatly combed back. He had shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw, and Clara found herself momentarily distracted by how handsome he looked. "Ready?" he asked, and she nodded. The ride into Winnetka took about 45 minutes. Clara stayed close to Cole, hyper-aware of every person they passed on the road. But no one paid them much attention. They were just another couple going about their business on a spring morning. The sheriff's office was a small building next to the general store. Sheriff Patterson sat behind a scarred wooden desk, reviewing what looked like wanted posters. He looked up when they entered, his expression brightening with recognition. "Cole Sawyer. And Miss Foster, was it not? What can I do for you folks?" Cole got straight to the point. "That man you were asking about the other day, the one making threats. His name is Marcus Dalton, and he showed up at my ranch yesterday. He threatened my cousin, claimed she owed him money and that he was taking her with him. I ran him off, but I do not think he is done." The sheriff's expression hardened. "Tell me exactly what happened." Clara took a deep breath and began her story. She told him about Samuel, about the gambling debts, about watching Marcus Dalton shoot her husband in cold blood. She told him about fleeing St. Louis, about the terror of being pursued, about Dalton's threats. She left nothing out, her voice shaking at times but never stopping. When she finished, Sheriff Patterson sat back in his chair, his face grave. "That is a serious accusation, Miss Foster. Murder is not something to be taken lightly." "I know what I saw," Clara said firmly. "Marcus Dalton killed my husband, and he threatened to do worse to me if I did not pay Samuel's debts with my body." "Do you have any proof? Any witnesses?" "The shooting happened in a saloon full of people. They all saw it, but I do not know if any of them would testify against Dalton. He is powerful, connected. People are afraid of him. And you took a horse that did not belong to you when you fled." Clara's heart sank. "Yes, I was desperate. I intended to return it once I was safe, but I understand that is still theft." "Technically, yes. But given the circumstances, I think we can call it extenuating factors." The sheriff drummed his fingers on the desk thoughtfully. "Here is the situation. I cannot arrest Dalton without more evidence than your word. But I can make it very clear to him that he is not welcome in my county, that I will be watching him very closely, and that if he sets one foot on private property without permission, he will be arrested for trespassing. I can also send a telegram to St. Louis, see if anyone there is willing to corroborate your story about the shooting." "That would help," Cole said. "Anything to make him understand that Clara is under protection." "I will do what I can. In the meantime, you folks be careful. Dalton does not strike me as the type to give up easy." The sheriff stood and held out his hand to Clara. "You did the right thing coming here, miss. Took courage." "Thank you, Sheriff." As they left the office, Clara felt marginally better. It was not a perfect solution, but at least now there was official awareness of the situation. If something happened to her, there would be a record, a trail leading back to Marcus Dalton. They were walking toward the horses when a voice called out behind them. "Well, if it is not the happy couple." Clara spun around, her heart plummeting. Marcus Dalton stood across the street, leaning casually against the wall of the saloon. He had a drink in one hand and a sneer on his face. "We are not a couple," Clara said loudly, aware of the people on the street who had stopped to watch this confrontation. "We are cousins. And you need to leave me alone." "Cousins? Is that the story you are going with?" Dalton laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "How convenient. Tell me, does your cousin know you murdered your husband? Does he know you are a thief?" "I did not murder anyone." "You did. And everyone here is a witness to you harassing me in broad daylight." Clara's voice carried, and she saw several townspeople nodding, their expressions sympathetic. "I am just trying to collect what is owed to me, sweetheart. Your husband died owing me $500. That debt does not just disappear. Actually, it does." The sheriff had emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. "Debts do not transfer to widows under Kansas law, Dalton. You should know that." "I am not talking about legal debt, Sheriff. I am talking about honor." "The man gave me his word. The man is dead, and you are harassing a woman under my protection. I suggest you move along before I find a reason to lock you up." Dalton's expression darkened, but he pushed off from the wall and straightened his jacket. "This is not over, not by a long shot." He looked directly at Clara. "You cannot hide behind these people forever. Eventually you will slip up, and when you do, I will be there." "That sounded like a threat," the sheriff said coldly. "You just made a threat in front of multiple witnesses, including a law officer. Give me one good reason why I should not arrest you right now." "Because I did not threaten anyone. I simply stated a fact. Facts are not illegal, last I checked." Dalton tipped his hat mockingly and walked away, disappearing around the corner of the saloon. The sheriff turned to Clara and Cole. "He is testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. I want you both to be very careful. If he approaches you again for any reason, you come straight to me." "Understood." "Understood," Cole said firmly. "Thank you, Sheriff." On the ride back to the ranch, neither of them spoke much. Clara felt drained, exhausted by the constant fear and vigilance. She wanted to believe that the sheriff's intervention would be enough to scare Dalton off, but something in the man's eyes told her he was far from finished. Back at the ranch, Cole insisted she rest while he and Tom caught up on chores. Clara retreated to her room but found herself too restless to sleep. Instead, she took out her violin and played, pouring all her fear and frustration and longing into the music. She played until her fingers ached, until the sun began to set and the room grew dim with approaching twilight. A soft knock at her door interrupted a particularly passionate passage. She lowered the violin and called out, "Come in." Cole entered, carrying a tray with dinner. "Thought you might be hungry. You have been playing for hours." "Have I?" Clara glanced out the window in surprise. The sun was indeed setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I did not realize." "It was beautiful, sad but beautiful." Cole set the tray on the dresser. "Are you all right?" "I do not know. I feel like I am waiting for something terrible to happen, and I do not know how to stop feeling that way." Cole sat down on the edge of the bed, a respectable distance from where Clara stood. "When my mother was dying, I felt the same way. Every day I would wake up wondering if this was the day I would lose her. It was exhausting, living in that state of anticipation. But you know what she told me?" "What?" "She said that worrying about the future robs you of the present. She said that every moment spent in fear is a moment you can never get back. She made me promise that after she was gone, I would not waste my life being afraid. That is wise. She was a wise woman." Cole looked down at his hands. "I am trying to follow her advice with you. I am trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons you might leave. I am trying to just be here in this moment with you." Clara set down her violin and moved to sit beside him on the bed. "I am not planning to leave, not unless you want me to. I do not want you to." "Ever." Cole turned to look at her, his dark eyes intense. "I know it is too soon to say this. I know we have barely known each other a month, but I am falling in love with you, Clara Foster, and that terrifies me almost as much as Marcus Dalton does." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She should be sensible, should remind him of all the reasons this was complicated and difficult. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same emotions she felt reflected back at her. Fear, hope, desire, and something deeper that felt inevitable and right. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And you are right, it is terrifying." Cole reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumb gently tracing her cheekbone. "Can I kiss you?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind to pull away. But she did not want to pull away. She wanted him, wanted the promise of something good in a world that had been so cruel. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, a question rather than a demand. Clara responded, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fabric of his shirt. The kiss deepened, growing more confident, more urgent. It was nothing like kissing Samuel had been. This felt like coming home, like finding something she had not known she was searching for. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Cole rested his forehead against hers, his hand still cradling her face. "That was better than I imagined," he murmured. "You imagined kissing me." "Every night for the past 2 weeks. Could not help myself," Clara laughed, a real laugh that felt foreign after so much fear and tension. "I imagined it too, though I felt guilty about it. No more guilt, no more fear if we can help it. Just us figuring out what this could be." They sat there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the dinner cooling on the tray forgotten. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and the prairie crickets began their evening song. It felt like the beginning of something, a turning point where the story could go in a new direction. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. Clara was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, enjoying the warm sunshine and the simple domesticity of the task, when Tom came running from the direction of the barn. His face was pale beneath his tan, and he was moving faster than she had ever seen him move. "Fire!" he shouted, pointing toward the western range. "The grass is on fire." Clara dropped the sheet she was holding and looked where he was pointing. Sure enough, a column of smoke rose in the distance, thick and black against the clear blue sky. Her heart sank. Prairie fires were deadly, could spread for miles, consuming everything in their path. "Where is Cole?" she asked urgently. "Out checking the herd. He is right in the path of that fire." Tom was already running toward the barn. "I am going after him." "You stay here, get ready to evacuate if the fire comes this way. Pack food, water, anything valuable. I am coming with you." No time to argue. Tom threw a saddle on his horse with practiced speed. "Stay here. If we are not back in 2 hours, ride for town and get help." Before Clara could protest further, Tom had mounted and was galloping toward the smoke. Clara watched him go, her mind racing. A prairie fire could be natural, sparked by lightning or spontaneous combustion in dry grass. But the day was not particularly dry, and there had been no storms. The timing felt suspicious, too convenient. Marcus Dalton. The thought came to her with absolute certainty. He had set the fire, trying to flush them out, trying to destroy Cole's livelihood. It was exactly the kind of vicious, vindictive move she would expect from him. Clara ran into the house and grabbed the rifle Cole had left near the door. She did not know much about guns, but she knew which end to point and how to pull the trigger. If Dalton was using the fire as a distraction, he might try to attack the house while the men were gone dealing with the emergency. She checked the windows, making sure they were all shut and locked. She filled buckets with water and set them by the doors, ready to fight sparks if they made it to the buildings. Then she positioned herself in the main room where she could see in all directions, the rifle cradled in her lap. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. The smoke in the distance grew thicker, and Clara could smell it now, acrid and threatening. She fought the urge to run outside and see if she could spot Cole or Tom returning. Staying inside was smarter, more defensible. She heard the horse before she saw it, hoofbeats approaching at a gallop. Clara moved to the window, rifle raised, her heart hammering. Relief flooded through her when she saw it was Cole, riding hard, his face smudged with soot and sweat. Tom rode behind him, and behind them the smoke had grown into a wall of orange and black. Clara threw open the door as they arrived. "Are you all right? Fire is moving fast," Cole said, dismounting in one swift motion. "Wind picked up, pushing at this direction. We need to create a fire break between here and the flames, dig a trench and burn off the grass in a controlled manner. It is the only way to save the buildings." "Tell me what to do." "You cannot help with this. It is too dangerous." "I am helping. You need every hand and I am here. Tell me what to do, Cole." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no time. "Get every shovel you can find. We need to dig fast." For the next 2 hours, Clara worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She dug alongside Cole and Tom, creating a trench in the earth that would hopefully stop or at least slow the advancing fire. Her hands blistered, her back screamed in protest, sweat poured down her face. But she did not stop, could not stop, because their lives and everything Cole had built depended on it. When the trench was done, Cole used kerosene to burn the grass between the trench and the buildings, creating a blackened barrier that would have nothing left to burn. The controlled burn was nerve-wracking to watch, flames licking up toward the buildings before dying back down, contained by the fire break. The main wildfire reached their property line as the sun was setting. Clara stood with Cole and Tom, watching the orange monster approach. It hit the fire break and slowed, the flames consuming the already burned grass and finding nothing new to feed on. For several tense minutes it looked like the fire might jump the break, might continue on to destroy everything. Clara held her breath, Cole's hand tight in hers. But the fire break held. The flames moved north, following the path of least resistance, bypassing the ranch buildings and continuing toward the empty prairie beyond. By full dark, the immediate danger had passed, though they would need to watch for sparks and flare-ups throughout the night. "That was too close," Tom said, his voice shaking with exhaustion. "If we had been an hour slower digging that trench, we would have lost everything." "How did it start?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer in her heart. Cole's expression was grim. "I found the source where it first sparked. There were kerosene rags piled in the grass, deliberately set. This was not a natural fire. Someone started it on purpose." "Dalton," Clara said flatly, "most likely, though I cannot prove it." Cole looked at her, his face haggard with soot and exhaustion. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated that he would try something like this. I should have been more prepared." "This is not your fault. It is mine. He is doing this because of me. If I had just left when he first showed up, none of this would have happened. Do not." Cole's voice was sharp. "Do not you dare blame yourself for what that man chooses to do. He is responsible for his actions, not you. But Cole, your ranch, everything you have worked for. What if next time we are not fast enough? What if he burns down the house while we are sleeping? What if he hurts Tom or you? Then we deal with it. Together." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She could feel his heart beating, fast and strong, proof that he was alive, that they had survived. "I am not giving up and I am not letting you go. So whatever Dalton tries next, we face it together." Clara buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the smell of smoke and sweat, and something fundamentally Cole. She was exhausted, terrified, and covered in soot, but in his arms she felt safer than she had any right to feel. They spent the night taking turns keeping watch, making sure no sparks reignited. At dawn, Cole rode into town to report the arson to Sheriff Patterson. He returned several hours later with grim news. Dalton left town yesterday afternoon before the fire started. Multiple witnesses saw him heading south toward Lawrence. The sheriff sent a deputy after him, but by the time they caught up, he had an alibi. Says he was in a saloon in Lawrence all evening, has a dozen people who swear to it. He paid someone to set the fire, Clara said. It is the only explanation, probably, but without proof we cannot arrest him. The sheriff is furious, says he knows Dalton is behind it, but his hands are tied. Cole sank down into a chair, his frustration evident. I do not know what else to do. I cannot guard you and the ranch at the same time. I cannot watch every inch of property all the time. Dalton knows that. He is going to keep picking at us until something breaks. Clara felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. This could not continue. Cole's life, Tom's life, everything they had built was at risk because she had sought refuge here. There had to be another solution. I have an idea, she said slowly, but you are not going to like it. Cole looked up at her warily. What kind of idea? What if I went to Dalton? What if I offered to leave with him, to go quietly, in exchange for him leaving you and the ranch alone? Absolutely not. Cole was on his feet instantly. That is not even a possibility, Clara. I will not let you sacrifice yourself to that monster. It might be the only way to end this without someone getting killed. Then someone will get killed, because you are not going anywhere with Marcus Dalton. I would rather lose the ranch, lose everything, than let that happen. Cole, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You are the one suggesting something insane. He took her hands in his grip almost painful in its intensity. Listen to me. I do not care about the ranch. I do not care about the cattle or the buildings or any of it if losing it means keeping you safe. You are more important. Do you understand? You are more important than everything else combined. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. I cannot let you give up everything for me. It is not right. It is absolutely right. I love you. I am in love with you, and I am not letting you go. Cole pulled her close, his voice fierce in her ear. We will figure something out. There has to be a way to stop him that does not involve you sacrificing yourself. They held each other for a long moment, the morning sun streaming through the windows and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe there was a solution that did not end in tragedy. But she could not shake the feeling that the situation was spiraling beyond their control. The answer came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, a visitor arrived at the ranch. A woman, middle-aged and elegantly dressed, driving a small buggy. She introduced herself as Mrs. Elizabeth Whitmore, and she had come from St. Louis with urgent information. I worked at the saloon where your husband was killed, she told Clara, accepting the tea that was offered. I saw everything that happened that night. I saw Marcus Dalton shoot Samuel Foster in cold blood, and I saw him threaten you afterward. Clara's heart leaped. You would be willing to testify to that, more than willing. Marcus Dalton is a blight on St. Louis. He has terrorized half the business owners in the city, extorting money, threatening violence. But no one will stand up to him because he has connections, political power. When I heard he had followed you out here, when I heard about the fire, I knew someone had to do something. Why would you risk coming here? Cole asked. If Dalton finds out you testified against him, you will be in danger too. My husband died 3 months ago. My children are grown and living back east. I have nothing tying me to St. Louis anymore, and frankly, I am tired of being afraid. Mrs. Whitmore's expression was determined. I have written testimony, signed and witnessed by a notary. I also convinced 2 other people who were in the saloon that night to provide statements. Together, we have enough evidence to bring murder charges against Marcus Dalton. Clara could barely breathe. This could end it. This could actually end it. The sheriff will need to arrest him, Cole said, but with this kind of evidence he will have grounds to hold him for trial. There is one complication, Mrs. Whitmore said carefully. Dalton has powerful friends. If we want charges to stick, we need to make a lot of noise, make this case too public for his friends to sweep under the rug. We need newspapers involved, multiple jurisdictions. We need to make him too notorious to protect." "How do we do that?" Clara asked. "We start by taking these statements to the sheriff here. Then we send copies to St. Louis, to the marshals, to every law enforcement agency with jurisdiction. We make sure everyone knows what Marcus Dalton did, and we make sure everyone knows that witnesses have come forward. That is the key. Once it is public knowledge, his friends cannot make it disappear without looking complicit." It took 3 weeks to set everything in motion. Sheriff Patterson acted quickly once he had the statements, sending telegrams to St. Louis and coordinating with law enforcement there. A warrant was issued for Marcus Dalton's arrest on charges of murder, arson, and intimidation of witnesses. During those 3 weeks, Dalton stayed visible in Winnetka, still searching for opportunities to get to Clara. But knowing that the law was closing in on him, he became more cautious, less bold. He could not afford to add more charges to the mounting list against him. The arrest happened on a bright morning in early June. A federal marshal arrived from Lawrence with the warrant, accompanied by Sheriff Patterson and 2 deputies. They found Dalton at the saloon where he had been staying and took him into custody without incident. He was transported to St. Louis to stand trial, shouting threats and promises of revenge the entire way. Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house and watched them take him away, Cole's arm around her shoulders. She felt numb, unable to quite believe it was over. "He will be convicted," Sheriff Patterson assured her before he left. "With Mrs. Whitmore's testimony and the other statements, the evidence is overwhelming. He will spend the rest of his life in prison if he does not hang." "Thank you," Clara managed. "Thank you for everything." After they were gone, Clara and Cole sat on the porch steps, not speaking, just being together. Tom had gone into town to celebrate with friends, giving them privacy. The prairie stretched out before them, green and peaceful, showing no signs of the fire that had nearly destroyed everything. "It is over," Clara said finally. "I can actually believe it. It is over." "It is," Cole agreed. "You are safe now. You can stay or you can go. The choice is yours, Clara. No more running, no more fear. Just the future, whatever you want it to be." Clara turned to look at him, this quiet, strong man who had risked everything to protect her. She thought about the past weeks, about how he had made her feel safe and valued and loved. She thought about her music, about the way he listened to her play with such genuine appreciation. She thought about the life they could build together if she was brave enough to reach for it. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "If you still want me here, I want to stay with you, build a life here. I want to play my violin and tend the garden and learn to be a rancher's wife, if you will have me." Cole's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. "Are you asking me to marry you, Clara Foster? I believe I am. Is that improper? It is perfect." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her forget everything except the feel of his lips on hers, the solid warmth of his body, the promise of all the days to come. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning. "We should do this properly," Cole said. "I should get you a ring, ask your permission in front of witnesses, do this the right way. We can do all of that, but the answer is yes regardless. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will stay. Yes to all of it. I love you, Clara. I love you too, Cole, more than I thought I could love anyone." They were married a month later in the small church in Winnetka. Mrs. Whitmore traveled from St. Louis for the ceremony, along with several other people from the saloon who had testified against Dalton. Tom served as Cole's best man, grinning throughout the entire ceremony despite not being able to hear half of what was said. The town turned out in force, these people who had taken Clara in as one of their own without even knowing her full story. Clara wore a dress of pale blue silk, purchased with money Cole insisted on spending despite her protests. She carried wildflowers from the prairie, and she had never felt more beautiful than when she saw Cole's expression as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional. But when Cole slipped the simple gold band onto her finger and kissed her as his wife, Clara felt something shift inside her. The fear and trauma of the past months began to fade, replaced by something bright and hopeful and entirely new. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by half the county. Clara played her violin for the guests, and for the first time in years, she played without any shadow of fear or obligation. She played for joy, for love, for the sheer pleasure of making music in a place where she felt safe and valued. That night, in the bedroom that was now truly theirs, Cole held her with a tenderness that made her cry happy tears. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies and rhythms, creating something beautiful out of their combined need and affection. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, talking and laughing and planning their future. "What do you want?" Cole asked, trailing his fingers through her hair. "For our life together. What does your ideal future look like?" Clara thought about it. "Music. I want to keep playing, maybe teach students if any families in the area are interested. I want to help you with the ranch, learn everything about running it so we are true partners, and someday, maybe children, if we are blessed. All of that sounds perfect to me." Cole kissed her forehead. "Though I have to warn you, I do not know the first thing about raising children. We will learn together, just like everything else. Together. I like the sound of that." The trial of Marcus Dalton took place in September. Clara and Cole traveled to St. Louis to testify, though Mrs. Whitmore's testimony proved to be the most damning. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Dalton was sentenced to hang for the murder of Samuel Foster. Clara felt no joy at the verdict, just a deep sense of closure. She had not wanted vengeance, just safety and justice. She had both now. Samuel's death had been acknowledged and punished. Her own suffering had been validated. She could finally close that chapter of her life completely. On the train ride back to Kansas, Cole held her hand and said nothing, understanding that she needed time to process her emotions. Only when they were nearly home did she speak. "I feel like I can finally breathe fully for the first time in my entire life." "I am glad," Cole said simply. "You deserve peace. We both do." The years that followed were marked by steady happiness rather than dramatic events. Clara established herself as a music teacher, with students coming from as far as Lawrence to study with her. Her reputation grew, and she occasionally played at concerts in Topeka and Kansas City, though she always returned home to the ranch and Cole. Their first child, a son they named William, was born in the spring of 1880, 2 years after their marriage. He had Cole's dark eyes and Clara's musical talent, showing an early affinity for rhythm and melody. Their second child, a daughter named Rose, arrived in 1882, with Clara's delicate features and Cole's stubborn determination. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Clara proved to have a good head for business, and together they expanded the herd and purchased additional land. Tom remained with them until his death in 1885, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the prairie he had loved, and Clara played Amazing Grace at his funeral, her violin voice breaking only once as she said goodbye to the old cowhand who had welcomed her with such kindness. Mrs. Whitmore became a regular visitor, spending summers at the ranch and winters in St. Louis. She became like a mother to Clara and a beloved grandmother to William and Rose. She taught Clara about herbs and medicine, about the practical skills needed to survive on the prairie. In return, Clara filled her life with music and laughter. On their 10th anniversary, Cole surprised Clara with a trip to Denver to hear a famous violinist perform. They dressed in their finest clothes and sat in the elegant concert hall, holding hands like newlyweds. The performance was technically flawless, but afterward, Cole whispered in Clara's ear that he preferred her playing. It was more honest, more full of heart. "That is because you are biased," Clara teased. "Absolutely, and I am not ashamed of it." They returned home to find that William, now 8 years old, had organized a surprise party with Rose's help. The house was decorated with wildflowers, and William had convinced several neighbor children to attempt a musical performance on makeshift instruments. It was chaotic and off-key and absolutely perfect. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Clara and Cole sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, the prairie a dark ocean stretching to the horizon. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Giving up the possibility of playing in those great concert halls you dreamed about?" Clara considered the question seriously. "No, those were someone else's dreams, I think. My father's dreams, maybe, or society's expectations. My dream was always just to make music and be valued for it. I have that here. I have students who adore me, a community that respects my talent, and a family that fills my life with love. What more could I possibly want? Nothing, I hope. But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want to try for something bigger, I will support you. You know that, right?" "I know. But Cole, this is bigger. This life we have built, the children we are raising, the love we share. This is as big as it gets. This is everything." Cole pulled her close, and they sat together watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Two people who had found each other in the midst of chaos and built something solid and beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Clara thought about the terrified woman who had ridden into Winnetka all those years ago, covered in blood and fleeing for her life. She barely recognized that woman now. That Clara had been broken and alone, defined by fear and survival. The Clara of today was whole, surrounded by love, defined by the choices she made rather than the circumstances forced upon her. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For giving me silence and safety when I needed it most. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For loving me when I did not think I deserved to be loved." "You always deserved it," Cole said firmly. "You just needed someone patient enough to help you see it. Well, thank you anyway. For your patience, your kindness, your courage, for being exactly who you are. Right back at you, wife." They sat together until the chill of the evening drove them inside, to the warm house filled with the evidence of their life together. Photos on the walls, children's toys scattered about, Clara's violin resting in its stand by the window. Every item told a story, represented a choice, a moment, a piece of the life they had built. As Clara prepared for bed, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. She looked older now, with fine lines at the corners of her eyes and silver threading through her dark hair. But she also looked happier, more at peace than the frightened young woman in the mirror had been a decade ago. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. In the mirror, they looked like what they were, a couple who had weathered storms together and come out stronger for it. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am. How improbable this all is. How easily my life could have gone in a completely different direction. But it did not. You chose to trust me that first day, even though you had every reason not to. You chose to stay and fight rather than run. You chose this life, Clara. You made it happen. We made it happen, together." "Together," Cole agreed, kissing her temple. "Always together." The years continued to pass. marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. William grew into a talented musician like his mother, eventually leaving home to study at a conservatory in Chicago. Rose proved to have her father's gift with animals, taking over more and more of the ranch management as Cole's joints began to trouble him. A third child, another son named Thomas after the old ranch hand they had loved, arrived unexpectedly in 1888 when Clara was 34. He was a surprise, but a welcome one, filling the house with noise and chaos just as William was preparing to leave for school. Clara continued to teach and play, her reputation spreading beyond Kansas. She published a book of folk songs arranged for violin, which sold modestly but steadily for years. She played at state fairs and civic celebrations, always returning home to the ranch and the man who had first given her safety. Cole's hair went completely silver by the time he was 50, but his strength remained. He and Clara still worked the ranch side by side, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. Their love had not dimmed with familiarity. If anything, it had deepened, becoming something solid and unshakable. On their 25th anniversary, the entire community gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Their children, now grown, organized the event with military precision. William brought his new wife, a pianist from Chicago. Rose brought her beau, a young veterinarian from Topeka. Thomas, now 12, played host with enthusiasm. Clara played her violin for the crowd, her fingers as nimble as ever despite her age. She played the folk song her father had taught her so long ago, the one she had played the first day Cole heard her music. As the last note faded, she looked over at her husband and saw tears streaming down his weathered face. "That was the first song I ever heard you play," he said later, when the guests had gone and they were alone. "I will never forget how you looked that day, standing in our living room with your violin, making the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I knew then that I was lost. I was lost too. But you found me. We found each other. Best thing I ever did bringing you to this ranch. Best thing I ever did trusting you enough to come." They made love that night with the practiced ease of long familiarity, knowing exactly how to please each other, finding joy in the small intimacies that decades together had taught them. Afterward, Clara lay in Cole's arms and felt overwhelmingly grateful for this life they had built, for every moment that had led them to this place. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too. Always have, always will." The last years of their life together were peaceful. They watched Rose marry her veterinarian and take over the ranch completely, making improvements and expansions that carried the property into the new century. They attended William's concerts when he came through Kansas on tour, beaming with pride at their talented son. They watched Thomas grow into a thoughtful young man with his mother's musical gifts and his father's steady nature. Cole passed away in the spring of 1915, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76. Clara held his hand through that final night, feeling his heartbeat slow and finally stop as the sun rose over the prairie he had loved. She did not cry until later, until after the funeral and the gathering and all the well-wishers had gone home. Then, alone in the house they had shared for nearly 40 years, she let herself grieve fully for the man who had given her everything. But even in her grief, Clara found comfort. They had had a good life, a full life. They had raised 3 children, built a successful ranch, loved each other deeply and faithfully. They had faced danger together and emerged victorious. They had created something beautiful out of fear and chaos. That was worth celebrating, even in sorrow. Clara lived another 8 years after Cole's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren. She continued to play her violin until arthritis made it too painful, And even then she taught, sharing her knowledge and passion with a new generation. She wrote her memoirs, detailing her flight from St. Louis and the quiet cowboy who had given her shelter. The book sold surprisingly well, touching readers with its honest portrayal of fear, survival, and love. She died in her sleep in 1923 at the age of 69, in the bedroom she had shared with Cole for so many years. Her children found her in the morning, peaceful and serene, her father's violin resting on the pillow beside her. They buried her next to Cole on the hillside overlooking the prairie, under the vast Kansas sky they had both loved. At the funeral, her grandson played the folk song she had taught him, the same one her father had taught her a lifetime ago. As the notes drifted over the assembled mourners and out across the prairie, several people later swore they could hear two violins playing in harmony, though only one musician stood at the graveside. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Rose's line. The house, where Clara had first found refuge, was preserved and eventually designated a historic landmark. Music students from across the country came to visit, to see where the famous musician had lived and taught, to stand in the room where she had first played for the man who would become her husband. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the prairie grass, people claimed they could still hear violin music drifting from the old ranch house. Some said it was just the wind, or perhaps the creaking of old wood. But those who had known Clara Sawyer insisted it was her ghost, still playing for the cowboy who had given her silence and safety when she needed it most, still making music in the home where she had finally found peace. The story of Clara and Cole became legend in Kansas, a tale of courage, love, and redemption. It was taught in schools, written about in books, adapted into plays and songs. But the heart of the story remained simple. A woman fleeing violence had found a man willing to protect her, and together they had built something lasting and beautiful. It was a love story, yes, but more than that. It was a story about the power of one person to change another's life completely, about the courage it takes to trust after betrayal, about finding home in the most unexpected places. Their great-great-grandchildren still worked the ranch into the 21st century, proud of their heritage, proud of the brave musician and the quiet cowboy who had started it all. The violin Clara's father had given her was preserved in a climate-controlled case in the local museum, still beautiful despite its age, a testament to the talent and passion of the woman who had played it. And every year on the anniversary of their wedding, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. They ate and laughed and told stories about Clara and Cole, keeping their memory alive. And always, someone would play violin, usually one of Clara's descendants who had inherited her gift. The music would float across the prairie, a reminder that beauty can come from pain, that love can grow in the wake of fear, that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, far better one. Clara Foster had fled violence and found Cole Sawyer, a cowboy who gave her silence and safety when she needed it most. In return, she had given him music and love, and a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations. It was more than either of them had dreamed possible that spring day in 1878, when she had ridden into Winnetka covered in blood and desperation. But then, the best love stories often are more than anyone expects. They are the ones where two people find each other against all odds, choose each other despite every obstacle, and build something that outlasts them both. Clara and Cole's story was exactly that, a testament to the enduring power of love, trust, and the simple act of offering shelter to someone in need. Their story was complete, their ending peaceful and right. And that was the greatest gift they could have given each other or the generations that followed. Proof that even in the brutal world of the Wild West, even when running from violence and fear, it was possible to find love, to build a home, to create a legacy that would echo through time.